remember this lady out of nowhere just goes, "You're about to quit, aren't you?" And I was like, yeah.
There's always moments that you want to give up. Being 100, it's easier to quit. But then I remind myself, if I quit, then what?
God calls the unqualified, and what God has for you is for you. There's literally nothing that can take you away from it.
Hello, my name is Kevin Clayton. I am a business owner and a music producer. I'm from Bakersfield, California, which is about an hour and a half north of Los Angeles. And as a kid, I grew up with my grandmother. My parents had me when they were 18, and so I spent a lot of time with my grandmother before they got married when I was about 3. And I used to spend a lot of time watching TV with my grandmother. She would always go and make cookies or some kind of food, and then we'd sit down and watch shows. And I remembered being enamored with just some of the different shows that we watched. Many of them, probably the more musical shows at the time. There was one that was called Hee Haw. That was this country show. There was a local artist from Bakersfield named Buck Owens that was a part of it. And it was just fun to watch them perform, doing music and dance and other things. And so I think as a child, it just stuck in me. My parents said that as a child, I was very loud. I was very rambunctious. I remember reciting the MLK speech, and they'd put it on the tape and they'd play it back. Listen to this kid, and I was just always sort of a performer, I think, as a kid. And as I got older, music became a rich part of my life, and I began to see how it really affected people, affected me when I felt sad. If I listened to some music, it could change the atmosphere. And I began to see how I do it for others. When I was in high school, I started DJing, and I used to love just waiting to find that song, kind of casing the crowd, putting a few things on, but then just knowing, okay, if I put this on, I bet you this is about to change, and it would. And it was such an incredible feeling. And so I think from that point, I've always had in my mind to try and find ways to use music that move people in good ways and that left impressions in their minds that would empower them and empower the people around them, and it wouldn't be something that was detrimental or hurtful. So right out of college, I decided that I really wanted to get into the music industry, and I started interning. I went to Pepperdine for college, which is in Malibu area, and immediately was able to get into a few internships in Santa Monica area. So I interned at 550, which is where Genuine and Celine Dion were located. I interned at Columbia, which at the time was Lauryn Hill, the Fugees, so many different great artists. There's another one I can't think of, Work, I think it was called. Fiona Apple was on there. So I ended up working at all these different places and ended up landing a job at MJJ Records, which was Michael Jackson's record label, and worked there for about a year and a half. Unfortunately, the atmosphere that I thought was gonna be there, I thought it was gonna be this exciting time. Oh, we're gonna be going these different places and looking for, these up and coming artists, and it just wasn't that. Unfortunately, there was this really odd relationship that happened between me and this guy that was there. We were really good friends, and but it ended up turning a little bit sour, and so I had to move home. And at that time, I think it was really tough for me because I felt like I was kind of at the pinnacle of things once I got into Michael Jackson's record label, and we got to go to Neverland Valley Ranch. We got to go all these things that were really cool, into Tito Jackson's house. But in the end, it just kind of all seemed like smoke and mirrors. And I was just there. I really was just about trying to do some music, trying to find something interesting. Yeah, at the time, Brownstone was coming up, Rodney Jerkins, who was doing a whole bunch of stuff with all these people. And in the end, I ended up back at my parents' house with my stuff in the garage, trying to figure out what was next. And I think that was really a low point. And the other piece is that my father is a huge entrepreneur back home, and he really wanted me to come back. So rather than him kind of like seeing my passions and wanting to find some way to pour back in to get me out there, it was almost like this huge magnet that pulled me back home and got me into a space and a place where I really didn't want to be. I was very close to just handing in the towel at that time, and because he was doing so well, he helped me buy a house. I had my own house. I had a really, really, really nice car. I was basically what you might consider to be like the next in line for taking over the company, and I was very much involved in everything, but I was miserable. And my father and I didn't really get along well at the time because he just saw things differently. I definitely stepped into the position and people loved me and I did really well, but the way that I was choosing to run the company and do my thing kind of rubbed against the way that he was. And so eventually I just left. It took some time. I mean, when I was back home, I got really big into church, and I had a number of friends that I mean, at the time I was going almost every day. The other thing that's really weird is that the church that I attended since I was a child, they did not allow music instruments in church. They sang a bit, but there just wasn't a lot of really expression in musical ways. And I grew up playing saxophone, and I remember sitting in church one day and thinking, man, that's crazy. Like, I learned to play the saxophone. It's crazy that God wouldn't want me to play my sax in church because I could play it for him, and why play it somewhere else? And so I think I was even struggling then inside the church trying to figure out who I was. But the funny thing was my brother ended up going to play football at UCLA, and the woman that's now my wife, I would go out to see her, and we had become friends while I was in college. She is a professional musician, and I remember her kind of talking to me about my life and just kind of sharing some of my music with her. And she was probably the first person in my life that really looked at me and was like, wow, you're gifted and you have these talents, and like, why aren't you doing anything with it? I decided that I was gonna like have another go at it and find a way to get back to LA to pursue the things that I really wanted to do. I think you often have things deposited in you when you're very young and you already know. I think when you see a child play, their giftings are exhibited, and I would tell that kid to just live it out. I think many of us know, but we're just scared because of the way that society's been built, the way the world exists, the way we see age, the way the world kind of plays on giftings that may seem to be better than others. We just have to really believe in the gifts that we've been given, and ultimately we may just have to believe in ourselves and who God has made us to be and stand firm on that. I think my younger self would be pretty proud, but I think maybe would want to kick me in the butt a little bit, because always carrying too much weight. I think at the end of the day, we just hold things too seriously. I think that my younger self would just say to walk out who you are. It'd probably be much easier to just let the weight go and be what you remember. One thing that I've learned about my journey is that everybody struggles, and that you shouldn't feel alone or shouldn't feel like, oh, it's just me, because more than likely the person right next to you, the person at the store, the person who you think is huge, that has something that they're holding, something that they need to deal with, yeah, you're not alone. The first thing that comes to my mind when I hear determined is just never giving up. I think sticking fast, really knowing what it is and why it is that you're doing something. The first thing that I think of when I hear relentless, never giving up, that there's not going to be anything that presents itself that you're going to allow to stop you. The first thing that comes to mind when I hear unstoppable is, I don't know, I think of like a superhero. The first thing that comes to mind when I hear I can't stop, won't stop, it feels like a chant to a song. It's something that's worth repeating because we shouldn't.